I have a homebrew world with pocket dimensions. The party found somebody else's and tried to force the door open. I told them it's basically impossible to try to open it without the specific key, but they kept rolling Arcana. Afterwards, I told them that the DC without a key is 35 for nearly impossible. The easy way is to prepare a spell with a specific key as the material component. I woke up to a wall of text from 3 a.m. from one of the players ranting about how I wasn't doing my job as a DM and that their character should have had a lower DC on the roll because he had built his own pocket dimension. Then I realized that they had left the game and removed me on Discord. I've never had a player get so mad over something like that, so I gotta ask, am I the asshole here? There is a problem with some players where they think they can just say, I'm gonna roll for this, roll and then win. Look, that's not always how it's going to work. Sometimes just having a do you win the session check isn't fun. There's a big part of me that will argue that most of the time it isn't fun. In this case, the DM prepared a pretty reasonable solution, and I guess the player just was not having it in any way. Shame. I sent this story to the Happy Jacks RPG podcast a few years ago, but I figured it deserved to be copy-pasted here. Please enjoy. Disclaimer, the story contains unseemly characters whose names have been changed as a courtesy to their disappointed parents. Recently, a few of our longtime gaming friends have moved out of state, leaving some holes in our Shadowrun group that needed to be filled. I turned to the internet, because, that's what you do nowadays. Having heard the horrible stories of terrible DMs, webcam master... What? Anyway, yeah, those stories that have been provided by the Happy Jacks fan base, I decided that maybe I should meet any online recruits in public before inviting them to my friend's apartment. The group and I arranged to meet an internet person named Rick at a local diner. Before heading out, Rick texted me saying, let me know an hour before you head out to the diner. I'm on rollerblades, and that's how long it'll take me to get there. That was red flag number 1. I told the group that maybe we should have a safe word in case Rick turned out to be awful. Naturally, we chose the horrendous game system we all hate as our safe word, Palladium Rifts. If during the interview with Rick, any one of us started talking about wanting to run a Rifts game, we knew that they were covertly exercising their veto power over this new player. We sit down for dinner, and I see Rick for the first time. He's got a long, nastily matted ponytail and a backpack full of unsorted computer parts that he claimed to have purchased. Red flag number 2. He plops down wordlessly at our table. Red flag number 3. After awkward introductions, Rick takes over the conversation saying, let me tell you the story about who I am as a player. And after I tell you the story, you're either going to love me or you're going to hate me. That was red flag number 4. Rick's story involved him arriving at a Pathfinder game for the first time and demanding to the GM that Rick have the opportunity to play himself in the game. That's 2016 Rick we're talking about here, lost in time, finding himself in a medieval setting. The DM begrudgingly agreed. We asked Rick if this was a good idea, seeing as how he'd presumably be underpowered next to all these actual fantasy heroes. Rick pulled out a harmonica out of his side holster and said, I'm a real-life bard. He also said that 2016 Rick had real-life knife skills. We asked him if he had a knife, and he said, well, yeah. Red flag number 5. According to Rick, the Pathfinder group was impressed with his antics. The GM and owner of the house, not so much, because Rick had engaged in behaviors that seemed kinda burglar-y. Rick told us that he was constipated the night of his game and had to get up to use the bathroom about 10 times. On one instance, Rick got distracted by the house owner's cat and decided to chase him around the living room, much to the GM's bewilderment. On one other instance, Rick ran out of toilet paper and began rummaging through the GM's drawers, also much to the GM's bewilderment. Finally, Rick had accidentally engaged the bathroom lock before closing it from the outside so that no one could enter. The game wrapped up, and afterwards, Rick got a text from the GM. Rick showed us the conversation, and I was horrified. It went something like this. GM 1045. Hey Rick, I'm sorry, but after tonight, I don't think I can trust you in my house. I hope you understand, and good luck finding a new group. Rick 1050. Wow, that's surprising, but I get it. GM 11 o'clock. Thanks for understanding. Rick then sent the GM 6 multi-paragraph long rambling psycho ex-girlfriend style texts over the course of the next few days, which included unsolicited phone numbers to Rick's character references who would vouch for Rick's integrity. At this point, I was terrified of Rick, who was sitting a little too close to me in the dinner booth. Rick leaned in and told us he was going to get back in that GM's good graces. The first step of Rick's plan is to have his friends show up to the GM's house unannounced and describe to the GM why Rick is such a good guy. The second stage of Rick's plan, well, this is when things go from what the hell to full-blown BS. Rick intends to show up at the GM's house on the day of his game and play his harmonica outside on the sidewalk as a form of protest. Rick described it as, "I'm protesting you so that you will learn to be my friend." Rick believes the other players, having recognized Rick and his enjoyable antics from the previous game, will come out and join his protest. GM would be left with no choice but to let Rick play. At this point, I've stopped counting the red flags. I blurted out, I'm thinking about running an online Palladium Rifts game. After dinner, I blocked Rick's number and deleted the account from the website I used to find him, so that he couldn't track me down on his rollerblades and introduce me to his real-life knife skills. The moral of the story is, screen any recruits before letting them into your game. Horror stories are real, and they are caused by folk like Rick. Funny thing is, on my normal morning walk through the city, on my route, sometimes I'll see this woman blazing down the sidewalk on some rollerblades, and each and every time I see her, I think it's the coolest thing ever. Rick kind of ruined it for me. Alright, but anyway, let's talk about first impressions. Even in D&D, first impressions mean a lot. I know it's one of those buzz phrases that just gets tossed around all the time, it loses its meaning, but your first impression does matter. Now, I'm mostly talking about the way you act, but, the way you look is also probably important, though I don't think you need to take that too seriously. You should probably, wear deodorant, though, like at the very least. But other than that, no, the thing that matters the most is the way that you act, and if you act like Rick does, you're definitely not getting into that game, to say the least. There's just not much I can say about Rick. His behavior is very interesting, and I'm just going to assume that most people aren't going to harass their DMs with harmonicas if they get respectfully booted from a game. But anyway, we're moving on now. Spend any more time on this story and Rick might find me with his rollerblades. Not really a horror story, just wanting to know if I did the right thing in this situation. I'm in my second D&D 5th edition campaign with a player who was originally a person I was having fun with, but not so much the more I see. In the first campaign, she played a Hexblade Warlock. I tied the blade to the story pretty heavily, and its owner ended up being the BBEG, but she never used it as a weapon and only ever casted Eldritch Blast and once casted Thaumaturgy in an entire 4-month campaign. I didn't bring it up because we weren't doing combat often, and I thought she just realized how optimal Eldritch Blast was and didn't look at her spell list because of it. Now, she's playing a Phantom Rogue, and as some of you are already able to guess, she didn't know how sneak attack worked, and guessed it was based on sneaking. I mean, I did that too. What can I say? I was a World of Warcraft fan way before I played Dungeons & Dragons, so... Anyway, the first time it came up in combat, she had advantage on a prone enemy, and when the damage was low, I asked, "Did you add sneak attack?" She asked why she would, and I explained. This was several sessions in, and she hadn't used a single rogue feature outside of proficiencies. I tried to casually say, yeah, it's really worth reading your features, especially as a Phantom Rogue, because they get some really cool stuff. She got really defensive about it, being her first time playing a rogue, which, side note, isn't true because this is the same character from a game I played with her that ended abruptly. I just dropped it because I didn't want to exasperate anyone, and I figured she'd read the features after that. Fast forward to 3 sessions later, and she still hasn't used any features. She was a part of an organization of rogue-like people that she had recently openly betrayed, so I figured it made sense to send some assassins. I sent 4 of them that had access to limited sneak attack and smite. Side note, she was resistant to radiant damage as an ASMR, so it was balanced around that. With only 23 hit points, by the way, against her and the Bard, both at 6th level. The encounter should not have been close in the slightest. Phantoms have a feature, when they sneak attack, they can use some charges to do extra damage to other targets. This would have made the fight easy. Instead, she got dropped to 2 failed death saves, and the only one because I changed their equipment to chainmail so the Bard could cast heat metal. I gave the enemies steady aim as a bonus action so I could show how useful the feature was to her, saying they're going to use a bonus action to steady aim every time I did it. Every one of her turns, she would just roll an attack. I reminded her that during these first few turns, she could use steady aim, which she always said, "Oh yeah, I couldn't do that now." I allowed it, and yeah, sneak attack deals damage, surprisingly. I DM'd her afterwards, asking how she wants to incorporate Whispers of the Dead and Wail of the Dead, and said how some cool flavor could be with how she's written her character. She liked 2 of the ideas and said she wants to flavor it like them. Fast forward to the next session, I do some horde enemies, where Wail of the Dead would be useful. No use of it. Didn't even use steady aim without a reminder. I gave them a goal with a proficiency none of them had that would be useful the next day. She chose not to swap her Whisper of the Dead proficiency. I get not wanting to tell someone how to play their character, but she just isn't playing it. If you choose mechanics for a character and I create events around that character, I've done my part, but there's an expectation for players too. And I don't think she met it. It's not fun for me and the other players. I told her she has to learn her features or leave the game. And I want to know if that's fair. She hasn't responded as of writing this. Oh boy. This is framed as Am I the Asshole, so we'll do the thing. Drum roll, please. Not the asshole! Look, I especially understand this from a DM perspective. I spend a lot of time prepping this game and prepping it around players. Luckily for me, I have players in both of my campaigns right now that read their stuff and understand their abilities. It's not about taking D&D seriously. It's a game after all. However, if you aren't engaging much and not reading your abilities at the very least, that's rough. Look, if you're new, I get it. You're not going to have all the rules memorized. However, at the very least, read your character sheet and have a vague idea of what they do. There are times where people will forget information. That's okay. That's what Google is for. We all have amazing information devices in our pockets that you can just take out and look up the future. It's not a big deal to simply ask a player to understand what their character is capable of so they can better engage at the table. Really hope this all ends well for the party, the player, the DM involved. I don't like seeing people get kicked out over this sort of thing just because it's such a small thing at a table, but, you know, sometimes it is what it is. Let me start by saying, I know it sounds like I'm in the wrong, that he must have a reason to think I am lying about my roles so I can succeed or something, but I truly have no idea why he even thinks that I am, because I swear I have never lied about a role before. So basically, I'm the only girl, 20 female, in my current D&D campaign, but I don't really mind or feel uncomfortable about it since all the guys I play with have been nothing but welcoming and chill towards me. They don't ever treat me any differently and are a great group of guys. My only grievance is that the DM has made comments since I started playing with them about how every female he has ever played with before always lies about their dice rolls so that they can impress all the guys and look better / hotter in their eyes. Which is a super weird thing to bring up in my opinion. I had just started and had shown no signs of lying about anything, so I was just kind of weirded out that he felt the need to bring it up, but whatever, I kind of just brushed it off and said I had played before and that I don't fake dice rolls because that ruins the experience and the risk of the game. It may even ruin the game for everyone else, and even myself. The DM seemed to accept that and let it go at the time. However, I have noticed that at least once per session, he will make some comment somewhere along the lines of how females just lie all the time. It's what they are biologically good at, and they all lie in games like this to look sexy to the men there. No one at the table really responds when he makes these comments. One of the guys tried once earlier on to mention that it was sexist and off topic to bring up, but the DM got mad at being cut off from sharing his personal life experiences and knowledge. So no one has spoken up since about it. I had been rolling in front of myself where everyone could see, so nothing was hidden. I didn't think this was a concern that I was cheating, so I just laughed and said, yeah, my luck was wild tonight. Then, at the end of the session, the DM said I had one more save to get us out of there, avoiding another fight that probably would have ended badly for us. I needed a nat 20 or I would fail. One of the party members assisted, so I had advantage, but the odds of success were still low. I rolled both dice, and by some miracle, I did it. I rolled a nat 20 on both dice. It was glorious, and everyone was super hyped. The DM just looked mad, and we all joked that he wanted us to fail so he could show off some more characters he made and do more of the fun combat stuff. He kind of chuckled and said it was something like that. The session then ended calmly with us getting back to our keep and getting set up to rest. Then we called it a night. Everyone packed up and we went our separate ways, assuming that was the end of the night. I got a message 2 hours later from the DM, and he was telling me he knows I cheated and lied about my dice rolls to look better in front of the guys. He said he was nice enough to not call me out there and then and embarrass me in front of everyone, as he should have, but he no longer trusts me. He demanded that I give him my dice next session, and that from then on, he will be rolling behind his DM screen for me, since I am proving to be just like every other lying female and ruining the game for all the honest guys who are playing with me. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say, so I just told him I had never lied, that I was sharing my dice with one of the guys, so they definitely weren't a weighted set or anything, and that my rolls were in the open, where everyone could easily see, that I could understand he may have had bad experiences in the past with players, but I had done nothing wrong and would not be letting him roll for my character for the rest of the campaign. He has yet to respond, but I'm still so out of it and insulted that he thought I was cheating or lying. I really like the group I play with, and the campaign story is super interesting, so I don't think I'll be quitting, but I certainly am not just going to sit around and not roll ever again and don't know what to do in this situation. I'm not kidding, while I was recording this, OP uploaded the part 2, so yeah, eyes up, this story is not done yet. For those saying he has a crush on me, yeah, he asked me out when I was a freshman in high school, and he was a senior. We were both in the same clubs, and he seemed nice enough to give a chance to him, so I said yes. We only dated for a month or two before he got super possessive and controlling, and I broke it off. He was still super bitter, so I cut him off entirely up until about 2 years ago. We only reconnected because we live in a small town, and so we share most of the same friends. He has asked me out 3 times since, and I have turned him down each time. The last attempt he made at asking me out, I very bluntly told him that if he ever asked me out again, I would cut him out of my life permanently. He seemed to get the message and has, until this game started, actually been acting really chill around me and never pushed my boundaries or said anything creepy. He just acted normally like all the other guys I'm friends with. Some of the other guys have said they will start to stand up for me in this matter. I screenshotted the conversation I had with DM and sent it to them this morning, and they were all shocked he was acting like this to me. We lived in a small town, and so this is the only group to play with around me. If I quit this group, I have no idea when/if I'll ever be able to play again, and I really like the other guys in the party, but none of them like to DM, and I'm still super new, and I don't feel comfy trying to DM for the group. The campaign is also like 2/3 of the way done, according to the timeline the DM gave us, so I'll probably stick it through for the next few sessions we have, and see if there are online games, I guess, if the DM is still creepy and acts like an incel. So we will see in 2 weeks how it goes when we meet up for the next session. Thanks for all the advice and messages everyone sent me. Look, I completely understand wanting to play D&D. This is a great game. It has changed my life in many different ways. However, I don't think playing in a D&D group that you love is worth putting up with this kind of behavior. The DM in this situation has clearly not changed their ways, at least entirely. They still have some very uncomfortable feelings around women. Look, I genuinely hope that in the future, the DM has the will and the resources to make a positive change in their life, to abandon these negative ideas around sex and romance and all that wonderful ALO stuff. I hope that. But that's clearly not the case right now. It's been 3 years, and they are still holding on to many of those ideas. They continue to ask you out 3 times, even though you continually rejected them. That is a major red flag, to say the least. Look, this guy clearly needs help, but you, OP, are not the person who needs to give them that help. Your priority should be taking care of yourself and your own mental well-being. I understand it can be painful to step away from a hobby that you love, but at the end of the day, this is a hobby. And putting yourself in a position where you are constantly with a person who makes you uncomfortable, who doesn't respect you at all, I don't see how that's worth it. Though, of course, I can't make that decision for the OP in this post. I wish them the best of luck in whatever course of action they decide to take. A friend of mine had invited me to join a random one-shot of some D&D 5th edition game someone in his server was hosting with a few of our mutual friends, who will be playing for the very first time. Why not? Couldn't be too bad, I thought. Oh, how naive I was. The DM was running a Tokyo-esque cyberpunk setting, which was fairly exciting at first, and he also claimed to be a rather experienced DM, which enticed me further into the game. The issue started early with the DM's odd arrogance and adamancy. The one-shot would turn into a full campaign, saying things like, "All my previous one-shots have turned into campaigns," in a cocky manner. It was off-putting right off the bat. He was also adamant that we have to have a healer. Apparently, one NPC in the entire setting sold healing potions or something of the sort. That was a bit odd as well. He also told us that we are going to go from level 2 to 3 mid one-shot, which I found quite odd. He continued to forewarn us on how we'd only level up if we interacted a certain way with a certain NPC, and if some of us didn't, we'd be behind a level. Big spoiler here, we never even met this NPC, nor did we make it to level 3. Now, I found this pretty odd, especially considering the fact there were 3 new players at this table, and everyone gaining their subclasses and levels in the middle of a one-shot might be kind of strange for said new players. I mentioned to one of the new players that leveling up mid-game is kind of weird, and not to stress about it when it came up, to which the DM became incredibly defensive and went on to tell me how I shouldn't hamper creative vision, and that he asked many experienced DMs about it. The DM also allowed one of the players to play over the text the entire game. He didn't read out the text or anything himself, and play sound effects for their character. It was really awkward once we got into the game. One last issue before the game is that the DM demanded we use the dice on D&D Beyond. I explained to the DM that on my laptop, D&D Beyond dice are super choppy and takes up to 30 seconds to load, to which the DM told me, roll your dice before you start your turn in combat. And I had to explain to him how stupid that is, and spent a solid 5 minutes arguing about it. He luckily added a dice bot to the server we were playing in. My friend, who invited me, had already dipped from all the red flags, but he still wanted to listen in. I only stayed to try and help the new players have a slightly better experience, and to witness whatever the hell this game would turn out to be like. Oh boy, did it turn out to be something special. Finally, we begin the game, and something immediately struck me. Oh my god, he's playing Vocaloid during the game. He played Vocaloid and later Japanese rap throughout the entire one-shot. Not even instrumentals, not even like hand-picked tracks at least. It's like a playlist of Vocaloid music was playing through the whole game. To say it was distracting is putting it mildly. Okay, after I got over the whiplash of the Vocaloid, our party met with a character who would hire us to do a job. The guy wanted us to go investigate some murders in the city for pay. Okay, that's cool. This still might be okay. The new players began role-playing their asses off immediately. It was a really cool sight, honestly, as they tried to haggle this guy for a mild increase in pay, to which the DM completely shut down to an insane degree. No reciprocation of the new players' really fun roleplay, no persuasion rolls, and he even began threatening the party that if we kept trying to roleplay, we basically wouldn't even get the quest and the game would end. So we reluctantly all set out to do the quest. This is where it became apparent that the DM did not help out any of these 3 new players make their sheets or teach them anything about D&D or the mechanics. After leaving the worst roleplay experience ever, we left the guy's HQ. One of the new players asked the DM to recount some of what the guy told us before we head out to do the job. And what the DM said next flashbanged me into next week and might have given me a concussion. The DM said, "Roll me a history check." I was flabbergasted, bamboozled, bewildered, and befuddled. The DM wanted a history check to recall what the NPC had just said to us 0.5 nanoseconds ago. I didn't mention anything, but I was in a state of complete and utter shock. Don't forget, the Vocaloid is still playing. Luckily, the player succeeded their check. Who knows if we could have even gotten to play if they failed, and we started searching for information in the area. We made our way into another part of the city where the DM randomly decided to bring up the red lights district in the area, which was apparently next to the school. He also thought it was necessary to mention the strange noises and grunts coming from an alley, which weirded me out personally. We started asking questions of a pleasantly offensive drug addict stereotype who is just as great as you'd think he is. At this point, we started noticing that basically every NPC would react to us in the exact same way, being weirded out by the party and acting super abrasive. Every single NPC acted the exact same way, and it got kind of exhausting. After nearly 2 hours of absolute nothing, meandering trying to find information on the murderers from cookie-cutter, weirded-out NPCs, we finally found an NPC who proceeded to describe, and I am not kidding, the exact words he used were, a hauntingly beautiful 4th grader around the area. That description and the way he said it had the whole table weird champing the hell out. And don't forget, Vocaloid was underscoring that description. Anyway, this information led us to a boarding school, trying to find the hauntingly beautiful fourth grade. Why? You know, why? Why do people do this? Why do people do this? The DM kept making non-stop jokes about our characters and the crap we were investigating, which was really uncomfortable for all of us. At this time, the Vocaloid playlist ran out, so one of the new players had to start playing music to fill the dead air. Luckily, it was OSTs for scenes and not Miku. No offense to the queen. Who the hell is Miku? Oh, she's a synthesizer. I have no idea what I was expecting. We finally found the fourth grader who was possessed or something like that, and 3 hours into the one-shot, we finally had our first combat. Finally, I was so happy to at least have something that wasn't crappy RP or jokes. Unfortunately for us, the combat didn't even last 1 round. The yokai in the hauntingly beautiful fourth grader decided to skedaddle and the combat ended. Okay, we guessed that we had to follow it, so we did, only to find ourselves in a hallway puzzle with 7 doors, which were magic-proof, so we couldn't try and do anything clever with the puzzle. At this point, we were going overtime, but luckily the DM could keep going. Extra lucky for us, one of the players decided to straight lie to get us out of the one-shot and said they had to go. Thank you, thank God. The DM asked us when we could all come back for another game, and we all awkwardly said we weren't interested in one and left. The poor new player said they did not end up having a good time, and holy hell, neither did I. I'm gonna be honest, I don't believe this guy was a very experienced DM at all. This is only a peek behind the curtain of absolute boredom and misery we experience playing that game. Let this be a warning to all ye players. Beware any DM who likes to talk about hauntingly beautiful fourth graders. Well, that was a story. That was certainly something. I don't know how else to say it. Obviously, the fourth grader stuff is gross. We're not going to entertain any other conversation on the matter. It's gross. Discussion over. On to the D&D stuff. There's actually a little bit to talk about here. One thing that I have always said is that music is awesome for Dungeons & Dragons. I cannot imagine playing D&D without music. The empty silence during combat would torture me, but having an appropriately epic soundtrack, especially a soundtrack that fits the enemy that they're fighting or the situation at hand, is amazing. I think it truly elevates your game. However, one thing I don't talk about because I don't usually think about it is if the music doesn't fit the game, or at the very least, is incredibly distracting. Distracting music can absolutely wreck everything. Distractions in general are the bane of Dungeons & Dragons. Focus is important when playing D&D. Engagement is important. And heavy distraction can kind of break that vibe. And by kinda, I mean it really breaks the vibe. And having loud, blaring, I'm assuming anime music. Sorry, I'm not familiar with the genre at hand. But point is, any type of music that distracts players and makes the game less fun and engaging to play is not music that's worth playing at all. Obviously, that's not the only problem going on here. There's so many problems going on here, but that's really the only problem I wanted to talk about. Let's move on. That was certainly an interesting episode of RPG Horror Stories, but if you guys enjoyed it, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out Shadow over Caraconas, my actual play D&D podcast, and while you're there in the cards, subscribe Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, "You can't roll dice," to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.